Assalamu alaikum wa rahmatullahi wa barakatuh. Okay, so I'm going to talk about another essay. Let me get straight into it. This is an Inspector Calls. So I'm sharing the screen now. Okay, so let me just increase the view. Something like this, I think. I'll get the annotate as well. Just go to the top. Okay, so this is a question about, I believe, the inspector, and it begins as follows. Because Priestley is a socialist, he uses the inspector as a proxy to deliver his socialist message that we are all responsible for the millions and millions of Eva Smiths and John Smiths, full stop. So it's quite a nice opening. It's very interesting. Short sentence. You've got a quote there. And he mentions that we are responsible, and how he even uses the idea that the inspector is being used to deliver a socialist message, and that this message belongs to Priestley, who is a socialist. So there's quite a lot happening in that opening paragraph. So let's see how it progresses. He, that is Priestley, once asked to vote for a socialist government and reject capitalism. So this is context. Okay, so we have context here. But he knows his audience, and so here he's focusing on, and now the question is it the audience of his time? Presumably, yes. Is mainly upper and middle class. The classes, isn't it? Yeah. So the middle classes, mainly the upper and middle classes. So put yes. Put it in the right place, and will likely reject his message. Yes. Therefore, so this is his point, he compares his socialism with religion by stating, "We are all members of one body." Another quote. From from a Christian perspective, obviously, England of the time. By the way, there's no reference to times. We don't know when is this book, when was it written? So I think a reference to the time post-war might have been important to do. Yeah, the Christian culture of this time might not might not consider the phrase "we are all members of one body" to have any religious significance. So just bear that in mind. Is implying that it is their duty to help one another. Priestley hopes to change the mindset of the upper class through the political diatribe of an Inspector Calls. I feel he's actually, I don't think he's trying to change the mindset of the upper class. I think he's trying to change the mindset of the working class, who make up the majority, and through them, perhaps the upper class. Let me explain. The upper class are in a privileged position. Why would they want to change? Why would they be persuaded to change? Other than maybe making them feel guilt. Now, the middle class, perhaps, because the middle class will be the ones that going to the theatre to watch the show. So there's an argument to be said there. But the upper class, there's a question mark there, because but if the working class are more aware of the situation, right? So he's addressing the audience of the time who might be more working class to middle class. And if he can get the majority of people to be on board, then he can hope to make a change in society through a type of pressure, because the working class would just increase on going on strike, what they call civil disobedience, in order to insist that the upper classes take heed and listen. So yes, definitely to change the mindset, but of who is may need a little bit more elaboration. Priestley, let me just keep going, successfully presents character of the inspector through him representing moral justice. So, okay, first opening paragraph, the second paragraph, the opening focuses on what the inspector stands for. Since his arrival at the start, the inspector views Eva, right? So Eva should be capital E because it's a proper noun, somebody's name, isn't it? The inspector views Eva as an individual rather than objectifying her with the term girl, unlike the Burlings. Okay, so I like that you're using the technical term objectifying, although the evidence of girl, I'm not sure how that equates to being an object. So the evidence you've given doesn't kind of match your point, right? Uses her name Eva Smith. Oh, I see. Okay, so he I see what you mean here. So by using her proper name or the proper noun of her name shows that despite class, everybody has an importance and should be treated equally. So yeah, he's referring to her as a girl, but whether that's called objectifying, yeah, I think you need to use another name. So let me another a word there. Put a question mark here. It wouldn't be dehumanized. It would be to call. They don't want to personalize her. So they are sort of generalizing her, giving her a kind of a common noun, a general term, rather than a specific proper noun. Yeah, I'll sort of phrase it this way. Okay. Showing that despite class, everybody has an importance and should be treated equally. Okay, yes, that's a fair point. Okay, now, just so you know, at this point, I know we just started, but you've got 3 pages and we're already nearing the end of the first page. I feel by this point you need to get into the meat of some kind of quotes about what the inspector is actually doing. Okay, so you might say that you are doing that by mentioning her name, Eva Smith. Okay, let's just see how it carries on. The inspector really cares for her and wants to get her justice. Okay, but what's happened to Eva? I think what needs to be established right from the get-go is that A, Eva Smith has committed suicide. Okay, and B, that the inspector has come to the family because he believes that they're involved in some capacity. And the whole play is to uncover the extent to which they are actually involved, and some of them are insistent that they have no part to play whatsoever. So the wider message is that we are all involved and responsible for each other. Right, let me just scroll up a little bit. In fact, let me have to delete all this. Clear all drawings, scroll up so I can see the end of the page. Right, so later he begins to undermine the Burlings and their beliefs and criticisms and criticizes them, indicating that due to their lack of care for each other, each of them helped kill Eva Smith. Finally, yeah, this is the important part here, because you need to connect the idea that Eva was killed, okay, which shows the chain of events, good quote, people's actions have. Okay, I think that might need a little bit of unpacking. Just one extra line. Connectedness, that people are connected just like events are connected. I think you just need to make that comparison. Okay, so the key word there will be connection and connectedness. Okay. And in a way, that's your segue to explain socialism. Okay, society, social society, community, people are connected. Furthermore, the quote, it's better to ask for the earth than to take it. That's another quote here. Reflects the moral stance of the inspector, which is what? He represents a voice of conscience, okay, and social justice in the play. Okay, have you explained what to ask for the earth than to take it? It's better to ask for justice rather than take justice in your own hands and become very materialistic and take everything. But asking for a type of equality is surely better, and that would be the inspector's perspective. He emphasizes the importance of recognizing one's responsibility towards others in society and the repercussions of selfish action. Yes, good. So far we have dealt with what is the inspector about, and I think you covered that quite well. Yes. Context. Is there much context? Um, you sort of hint about the time when the play came and trying to change the people's mindset, but you didn't really reference time as we mentioned earlier. So I feel that's kind of missing there. Okay, let's move on to page 2. Clear all drawings, and let's move on. Page 2. Increase view. And scroll. So Priestley uses the inspector to highlight and expose the corruption in the upper class, or with the upper classes, I think, with the upper classes. Let's put that a bit lower. Showing the 1945 audience how society must break down social barriers, otherwise there will be consequences. So good, finally the time reference. Okay, but my question then is, why did he set it in 1912? Okay, now if this response does not answer that, the answer, I'll give you the answer, is 1912 was a period in Edwardian society where society was dominant in a classist mindset. And so he deliberately picks a moment that he is trying to demonstrate is so far removed from the society that England has arrived at after the World War, because during that World War, when there was this common enemy, both the working classes and the middle and the upper classes were working together despite the class differences against a common enemy or threat. This idea of working together showed Priestley that there was a way out of the classism. So you could argue that they needed an enemy. And in this case, the enemy now becomes this idea of a class-based hierarchy, which is a preventative. In fact, secondarily, the World War was a culmination of a capitalist ideology whereby if you imagine each nation is like an individual, they are vying with each other for power, wealth, materialism, which ends up inevitably leading to a world war. Do you see? So he's creating a vision, or he's presenting a vision of what a future Britain might be like. And in his mind, the solution is a more of a socialist idea of Britain, which focuses on community and not selfishness. So a type of selflessness. Okay. And that is what he's being asked for in his play. Obviously, I'm presenting the argument that Priestley is proposing. You could also link here with the Journeys into Daylight broadcast of his and the BBC, where he talks about the need for a great communal task that we have to work towards, quote, a great communal task, right? As part of his, in a way, a type of utopia is what he's calling for. The next paragraph, Priestley masterfully presents the character of the inspector through him being the personification of socialism. Okay. When the inspector was being described, creates at once an impression of massiveness. He's not a large man like Mr. Burling, but his aura creates a large impression, symbolizing that you do not need to be greedy like capitalists to show power. Showing power is not always linked to material things. Okay, yeah. A little bit clumsy when you mention to show power, showing power. Yeah, try to use a synonym rather than using the same words. It doesn't sound as good. But I like how you've brought in the stage direction there, impression of massiveness, and then contrasting against Mr. Burling. Okay, let's carry on. This can be similar to socialism. It may have been small back then, but it was very effective and impactful. Okay, that is not clear. What do you mean by it may have been small back then? And what do you mean by it was effective and impactful? Where was it effective and impactful? So there's a kind of a question mark. I would suggest like it's a bit vague. Okay, no specific details given. Also, so we move to a further point. In his final speech, he promotes many socialist views, showing his care. His care, not for greed, but for those around him. I'm not sure what he's showing. He cares, maybe. He cares not for greed, but for those around him. Yeah, so I think that's just expression, just phrasing here. For example, we are responsible for each other and all intertwined with our lives. Yeah, I think these are two good quotes. And that shows the idea that we have to be responsible. We are connected. That kind of links up with the previous point. These quotes emphasize togetherness of society. Okay, let me just delete all the text so I can scroll up. Okay, so these quotes, where was it? Emphasize the togetherness of society, suggesting individuals within society have a collective obligation to look after one another. Instead of arresting the Burlings, the inspector teaches them a lesson about how he believes the power of knowledge is greater than wealth. Good, lots of explaining. What needs to happen is a case study, examples. So that's not happened yet. No examples of Priestley interacting. So not Priestley, the inspector interacting with the characters and how he interrogates them. Okay. Priestley uses the inspector as his mouthpiece to promote his own socialist views. Okay, you've sort of said that before, you're repeating that. Being against selfish desires and social and economic inequality. This is all mirrored within the inspector. So I feel at this point here, you're telling us what you've already told us. So there's no new information here. Okay. This part here is actually quite interesting. But as I say, you need to show how in the play this happens. Okay, now my concern is you only got one page left. So this is going to be a very important last page. And so I will clear the drawings here and move on to the last page. Okay, increase the view and scroll. Priestley finally presents the character of the inspector through his warning of the consequences of the lack of social responsibility. Okay, so I still feel you've not really talked about him approaching each of the candidates or the family members and what he was trying to establish, how he was trying to understand their involvement or to expose. I like how you said that he was trying to teach them. That is true. But I think you also want to mention is trying to get them to acknowledge their faults through a confession, and that would link to the religious imagery, the idea of confession. And then you could make a joke and say it's ironic that his name is Priestley, but that probably won't you get much marks, but depends how you do that. Right, I can't see the top part here, so let me just scroll down a bit. Through his warning of the consequences of the lack of social responsibility. Okay, so again, you've said all this. The inspector's arrival is due to each Berling member's lack of care and abuse in power. He is sent as an almost divine judge, knowing all about their actions and calling them out. Okay, this is better. This is a bit where I'm waiting for. That you're now talking about the actual investigation and the actual attending to them one by one. So we need that detail. If you look at your evidence here, there's no evidence. You're just kind of explaining in a general sense that that's kind of what he's doing. One line of inquiry at a time. There we go. That's what we're waiting for. So similarly, World War One. Yeah, you don't need to write WW1, just World War One, also arrived due to people taking the capitalist pathway and not being community minded. Okay, do you see the problem here? I can't see how this connects to what you were literally saying. This could have come earlier when you were talking about the problem with the capitalist mindset. So this context point, which is a good point, is kind of in the wrong place. So we'll put a little question mark there. Okay, so it's not embedded in an appropriate the link. Remember, that's one of the categories when you're marking. It's not in the right place, I think. Let's keep going. In the inspector's final speech, he sends a message to both the Berlings and the contemporary audience. Good, that's good. He's addressing two audiences there. About the consequences of lacking responsibility, breaking down class barriers, or rather, the need for breaking down class barriers. You're just missing the word the need for. Yeah. Otherwise, it sounds like the problem is breaking down the class barriers, because you said consequences of lacking responsibility. The consequences of breaking down class barriers sounds like that's bad, but you mean the consequences, or the need for rather, so you kind of different phrasing there, and directly confronting them. Quote, if men will not learn that lesson, then they will be taught it, I think, in fire, blood, and anguish. So that's the famous quote. Now, will you have time to elaborate on what that means? The word fire has religious connotations of hell. Good. Therefore, it is the punishment for not following the message of both Christianity and socialism. Yeah, although remember, the inspector doesn't come to preach Christianity. Just have that in mind. So you've got to rephrase that a little bit. The word blood is the main consequence of not being socially accountable. World War II. Yeah, that's you're kind of writing in note form there, so be careful. It just feels like it's just being chucked in. The inspector is warning the characters and the audience, and is urging them to consider the human cost of their behavior and to strive for empathy and accountability. Okay, that's good. Finally, the word anguish tells us that anger and pain will be experienced by everyone who suffer at the hands of the selfish. Good. Clear all drawings so I can scroll and see the ending. In conclusion, Priestley's main objective of this book, of the play, emphasize the word play there, is to change people's mindsets on how essential socialism is and to show how redundant capitalism is. Does this by projecting his voice through the inspector who had come calling. I like the ending there. The ending is nice with a play pun on the title. Good. Okay, so I feel the element that needs to be developed is the case studies. Now you can't talk about every single example of him interrogating, but you would probably want to contrast probably Mr. Burling and with Sheila, emphasizing how the younger generation take on the message, whereas the older generation, who are part of the old order, part of where the hierarchy might persist, um, you kind of make a point about this. The other thing is the context. Now, remember, the context is you could argue 50%, let's say 40%, even if it's 30%. Do you feel you've covered enough context? You do connect to Christianity, so that is true. I just feel, and you do mention the audience of the time, and you do mention the date of 1945 once, but you don't mention where it is set. Let me just double check. Did you mention Edwardian? Because that would help placing it in 1912. So I'm just going to move this out of the way. Just see if I see Edwardian. No, he didn't say Edwardian. I thought it might be at the beginning. Middle, 1945, end. You got World War One. But yeah, as I say, yeah, you did mention World War One, which could be a reference to Edwardian. I think those are those areas that I think needs to be developed. So you need to make sure you have detail about these other important but kinetic points. Now, the question is, it's all about the inspector, and you are quite thorough with your devices on the inspector himself. You just don't see much with the inspector interrelation with other characters. That's what's missing. And you are comprehensive. You talk about the beginning, and the middle and the end. I get a sense of that. So I would feel that this would probably be upper level 4, but I believe it could actually enter into level 5. The only thing bringing it down could be the context and the seemingly lack of detail there. Your expression is quite good, so you'd get higher marks on the VSPAG. If we were to kind of pick out certain key words, you have accountability. Let me show you just about, you can see perhaps, where is it? Here. Empathy, contemporary, just on this page. Yeah, those are the ones that come to mind. Redundant down here. Projecting. Okay. Also, you have this previous page. Anything else worth mentioning? Okay, nothing significant on the second page. Consequences, maybe over here, consequences. And then page 1, we have got, let me try and find, I saw something which is quite important. We have got perhaps objectifying. There's something I saw here. Repercussions down here. And proxy up right at the top. Yeah. So yeah, does that warrant it being at the top mark? I feel so. I feel a mindset is a bit more average, but the phrasing, the fact that it does flow, is a strong argument to put it in the higher banding, and the minimal errors in terms of spelling, punctuation, and grammar. So yeah, level 5, probably a grade 8 is my feeling, if not high grade 7, but I think it's a grade 8. Okay, Jazakallah khairan. Assalamu alaikum wa rahmatullahi wa barakatuh.